The first thing I did want to chat about, and Gary, it'd be great to get your thoughts on this in a moment, is yesterday's story that Robbie Keane has been linked with the Ireland under-21 job. And when I say linked, I got the sense from reading the report in the Irish Independent that Robbie Keane is very keen on this job.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask. I hadn't seen it, so I was going to say, is it the FAI going strong for Robbie, or is it Robbie pitching himself for the gig?
You can never tell by these sources, but you can always tell by these sources, I think, is a fair thing to say. And I think it's fair to say that Robbie Keane, if you offered him a job within the FAI right now, he'd be well up for it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's just completely hit and miss. Nobody can say with certainty that Robbie Keane would be great at this job. Nobody can say with certainty that Robbie Keane would be poor at this job. When a fella is going into his first role like that, like the likes of Frank Lampard has just done, it really you just don't know. I was talking to somebody just this morning. We had a training session this morning with a young guy who did last season was with Shamrock Rovers, and was working directly under Duffer, and by all accounts, he's been an absolute revelation. He's been absolutely brilliant. If Robbie can bring that level of enthusiasm and kind of, real drive to it and really share the wisdom of what he's picked up over the years, you'd imagine he should be fairly good at it. I actually saw Robbie and Damien doing their UEFA A assessment.
Right.
They did it down in Carlow IT. The two of them did it on the same day, and I was Wexford manager at the time. Quite a lot of our team were playing for Carlow IT. Or were in Carlow IT, so they were the players, because you need participants obviously for the assessment. You need players to work with and coach, so it was a lot of the Carlow IT students who were also Wexford Youths players, and it was good watching the two of them. It was very, very good. I would say probably not overly so, but Robbie's seemed a little bit more off the cuff, doing his maybe than Damien looked like he'd prepared again and rehearsed, and you maybe even get that sense a little bit from their personalities that might be how they go about it, which is interesting. Yeah.
No, because I think the big challenge for Robbie would be very tempted to pick himself, especially if they're struggling for goals. He said, I could do better than these lads. But for a first step in the coaching ladder, it's an odd one, because Damien is very much involved in day-to-day coaching with Rovers. So that's, and you learn a huge amount when you're working day in, day out. But how often do the under-21s meet up during the year? Maybe 6-7 times,
Max, yeah.
Yeah, max. So, you're trying, when you're learning your trade, your time is very limited on that. I think he would be better off going in at club level. But I can see the attraction for him, because I know he's very ambitious. I know he wants to manage Ireland one day. And if you look at the ladder within, from the outside, you might think the natural step is from under-21 to senior. And it's happened in a lot of countries that under-21 managers end up getting the senior job. So he might think that's the best step if I want to get the Ireland job down the road. But, there has been a lot of talk about change at the under-21. Noel King has been there quite a while. The results haven't been what people would like. So there's talk of maybe a fresh voice, fresh approach is needed. So... And Robbie would bring something. He also brings a bit of bit of stardust to it, because and you can't underestimate that as well, because even though it's there in the senior setup with, say, Roy Keane, but to a lot of those players they hardly remember Roy Keane because of their age. But all the players under 21 will still remember Robbie. They're still close enough to remember what Robbie did. So I think he would have an impact on them. So it would be an interesting move.
If you could get the balance right between, as you say, the X factor of a Robbie working alongside a student of coaching, almost to put it, if I can't think of a better way of putting it, like Tom Mohan has done an absolutely terrific job at underage level. Somebody who's really kind of into that side of it alongside somebody like Robbie, something like that, if Kinger was moving on, could be something that could work very well.
Yeah, definitely, it's a good shout. Gary, are you surprised by the idea that Robbie Keane is more off the cuff than Damien Duff?
Not really, in terms of I haven't seen him. It's interesting to hear that from Shane, because it's very evident when you see someone coaching whether or not they're good or not. You can see straight away, regardless of the level they've played. Now, I would look at the situation in terms of Robbie being linked to that under-21 job. I'd be fascinated to know what the actual role will be. Because if you're telling me he's a coach, I'd argue, well, where's he been coaching? How's he learnt his trade? Because you don't give the next generation of players to someone who hasn't really coached. If you're saying it's more of a mentor, I can understand that in terms of his experience as a young player coming over from Ireland to England. But I'd counter that by saying Robbie never played for the under-21s. So it's difficult to give his experience there. It's all well and good saying, I can tell you under-21s what it's like to play in the Premier League, what it's like to play for Inter Milan, that type of scenarios. Totally different. And I understand it. I understand in terms of the kudos with bringing our star players back in and seeing if they can give us something. But they've got to be out of coach. It can't be just that they were top players, because it's a totally different remit. We're seeing and experiencing something that with a senior team now. Every time Martin O'Neill talks about the role that Roy Keane plays, they say he's the driving force of Manchester United. What a brilliant captain. Irrelevant. He's not playing. It's what is he doing on the coaching field? That's the remit. That's the responsibility you have. And we have to be careful. It's not a PR stunt. Now, Robbie's one of my good friends. I spoke to him for a while. That's the case with football. You kind of drift apart. But I want to know that he's done the backlog of work, that he can actually coach. Because you don't just give this next generation, which is obviously so important to us as a nation going forward.
Do you know what level he's at in terms of coaching qualifications? So, and have you heard, has he got the pro licence?
I don't think he does. So he
wouldn't be qualified to manage in the League of Ireland Premier Division.
No,
but
that's
he could have got a League of Ireland under-21 job. That's a bit mad, really, when you think about it.
It is incredible when you think about that, isn't it? And I think you might be onto something there, Gary, when you mentioned the potential mentorship role. I think it's clear from the reports yesterday that the top job in the under-21 setup is what Robbie Keane is looking for, and eventually one day, as you said, Kieran, probably managing Ireland one day is on his to-do list. Is it dangerous from Ireland's point of view just to throw him straight in there? I think it's quite unusual that Robbie Keane would actually want to start his career off with an international team, and first of all, an underage international team. I think it's not very hands-on, regular work, to be honest, in terms of building up those necessary coaching skills. It's just unusual in my perspective.
Well, if you ask, is it dangerous? Look at Steve Staunton being given his first job as the Ireland manager. It's very dangerous. If you're not good enough to do it, you shouldn't be put in that type of spotlight. People can argue a similar scenario with Mick McCarthy, but he coached for a while and managed for a while at Millwall. Now, I'm under no illusions. There's a lot of managers who can't coach. They don't do the coaching. They're there as a figurehead. They get good coaches in and around him. Now, if Shane says that Robbie Keane's, in terms of what you've seen, his strengths not coaching, and I've no doubt that Robbie would identify what his strengths are, and he'd make sure that he's got a good network around him in terms of covering the skills that he's not particularly good at this stage of his management coaching career. But I just think, and it always concerns me, PR stunts by the FAI. We've seen it before in terms of bringing Keith Andrews in, the likes of Kenny Cunningham being brought in as well. Those scenarios didn't last particularly long, and I've seen those two guys coach. Notably Kenny, they're very good coaches, and then obviously we know that Duffer's doing a very good job as well. So I would just reserve judgment just quite now. And if we're talking about ex-players, then look at Lee Carsley. That's a guy you should be identifying for the under-21 job for Ireland. You should be banging his door down in terms of his experience, and not just because of him as a player, but his body of work as a coach. And I think the very fact that the English FA are really looking to integrate him into their system and move him through the ranks, it looks bad on us, to be perfectly honest, that we've let him slip through the net.